this first episode of Series 7 of the Great British Sewing Bee, it was great to see the usual enthusiastic group of contestants. With 2 of the 3 challenges, however, I noticed a few techniques that could benefit with a little bit more explanation. The first relates to the fitted shell top and the importance of a finished dart. The second deals with how to handle the large amounts of fabric when setting in a gathered ruffle. So one technique deals with a fitted garment and the other with a more voluminous flowing garment. So let's start with a dart. Next to straight seams, darts are the most basic structural element of sewing. Darts are formed from triangle shapes on the pattern with 2 stitching lines on either side of the central line. Darts are sewn from the wider end down to the point. The stitching line should be straight and sewn evenly from the beginning to the point, and letting the needle just run off the cloth at the point end. The dart shape is folded on the center line so that the stitching lines are matched. You can set this up with pins. I pin along the stitching line because I find this gives better control, because the pin goes in and then comes back out again. So I think this gives a better lineup. One final pin just outside the stitching line gives you a marker to aim for. The stitching line in this particular bust dart runs parallel to the bias of the cloth, so this unstable grain is going to need some control. Here I'm starting the dart at the wide end with a simple back stitch and removing the pin. Never run over a pin, even if you're pinning perpendicular. And so straight and even, all the way to the end. And keep your eye on your marker pin, feeding the cloth in. Don't work against your machine. And let the machine and the needle just run right off the cloth, gradually and gently. When you're finished sewing, tie the loose ends in a double knot to secure your dart. Clean up your threads, and then we're ready to hand press. Pressing is every bit as important as the sewing, and you should always press as you go. And you can start with a hand press like this, and you can see how we're beginning to build some shape that's going to fit over the contours of the body. I'm going to spend some time on the pressing here by first looking at the dart from the underside of the fabric and isolating the stitching line, folding the center line. And remember, we're working on the bias of the cloth, so we need some control. Using your iron, keep things moving with a light pressure and light steam, and work with a circular motion at the point. Turning the work around, we're going to press the dart the other way, again along the stitching line. And this is good because it teaches you to be versatile with the iron. You're working on your piece from different directions. Now you can see the developing shape. It's no longer a flat piece of fabric. And here, one final press, moving the iron downward and flattening everything out. Again, the circular motion, point, press the entire shape. And just note that your finished dart should always point toward the fullest part of the body contour that it's going to conform to. And now, let's look at the gathering of a ruffle. Here we're going to be making a ruffle. We're going to be gathering a section with a ruffle into a straight section. You're going to set your stitch length to the longest on the machine, and this first line of stitches here is going to be sewn on the seam allowance. So here I'm using 1/2 inch. I'm leaving a nice long tail of threads here for gathering later on, and then resetting the ruffle in place and sewing a second gathering line about 1/4 inch away, closer to the raw edge. So once these two stitching lines are in place, then we're going to begin to gather up this section that eventually goes into the straight section. This is relating to the buffet dress on the Great British Sewing Bee, in the first episode. So the first thing we're going to do is isolate the two threads that are closest to you, the upper thread and the lower thread, and secure the next to the underside to the back. We're securing this thread with a twist, making the two threads even, and we're beginning now to pull the fabric back, and you can see this is beginning to form our gather line. You can work from, say, the right to the left and stop, because it does get a little riskier the further along you get, and you don't want to risk breaking the threads. So you can see with the right hand I've got some light tension there, which is just keeping everything in place. And as you go along, try to even out the gathers so that you've got a smooth line of ripples. So we'll stop here, and then we will go and work on the left side. But before we do that, we're going to secure the work that we've already completed. We don't want to lose progress here. So this is just a little couture technique of wrapping the threads around a pin so that you secure them onto that one side which you've got completed. A little bit more adjustment there. You can use your fingers along the way, or you can pick up a pin and you can do the same thing to the same effect to further refine the rippling effect that you've got. So once you're happy with that half, we can start the other half. And just once again, you take your top two threads, isolate those from the bottom two, twist the two threads together, put a little bit of tension on it, and then begin to pull the fabric away. Now working from the left side to the middle until your rippling line, your gathering line, meets what you've already completed. And again, you use your fabric, your fingers along the way to just refine what you've got. Once you're finished, then you're ready to join this ruffle to the straight section. And you can see here, I'm just pulling the work so that it's all straightened out. So here's our straight section. We're going to flip the work around, tidy up the threads, and align the ruffle to the straight section at the edge. I'm going to start with just a small back stitch just to secure the work. Remove our pin. Now we're going to be sewing this about a thread's width, very close to that seam allowance thread. So you're going to be sewing right under it so that when you turn your work around, there are no stitching lines showing. Now here I'm going to go nice and slow because I'm going to be looking to make sure the work to the left is stretched out of the way. I'm going to be watching that I'm sewing as close as I can to that seam allowance gather line, but that I'm always to the left of it, about a thread's width. and then checking all along the way that your raw edges are even and that your stitching line is straight. And again, keep the work to your left, keep that straightened out as much as you can, and keep checking. And you'll see when these two sections come together how you can grow a garment. You can lengthen it, and you can add volume, you can add girth to the garment with this technique of gathering in your ruffles. And you can see on the sewing bee how those lovely dresses gained all that movement, all that length, using this technique of gathering a ruffle. So we're just about done, and you again want to backstitch, secure these threads because you've put in a lot of work, you've got what you want, you don't want to lose any of this. So now the threads are tidied up. And now you can open up your work with the seam allowance going away from your gathered section. Turn it around another way so it looks like a dress. Straight section on top and your ruffle on the bottom. All complete.